As the president searches for an answer on what the future war in Afghanistan should look like, there is one book that both the New Yorker and the New York Times recommend that he read. It is the book written by my next guest. Joining me now here live in the studio is Rufus Phillips, former CIA officer, presidential advisor, and the author of the book, Why Vietnam Matters. Mr. Phillips, thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate your being here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
And we should tell folks that you were the boss of the very first boss for Richard Holbrooke, who is the president's advisor on Afghanistan and Pakistan.
That was when I was running a rural counterinsurgency program, and he was a young Foreign Service officer, only 22 years old. And I sent him out in the countryside with a lot of responsibility.
Hey, you were a counterinsurgency expert in Saigon in the 1950s, years before the Vietnam War.
Well, 50s and 60s.
And 60s. After your long experience there, do you see history repeating itself?
Not precisely. I think there's some false analogies that are made. That is that people focus on the sending of troops and they equate that with Johnson sending troops to Vietnam. But the situations were much different. We had no troops in Vietnam. We only had advisors. So then we sent in the American Army to basically defeat the Viet Cong and turn the country back to the South Vietnamese. We've already had troops in Afghanistan for almost 8 years, and we're just adding to them, but we're changing the mission focus. Focus is now on counterinsurgency. Focus was before on trying to isolate and kill the insurgents. But what happened with that was that we started making more Taliban than we were killing, because we were killing civilians, and that was recruiting Taliban.
So is the counterinsurgency the right strategy? Is it right to change that strategy, change the focus in Afghanistan?
I think it's absolutely right. I don't see any other way, because the outcome of this contest is ultimately going to depend on the Afghan people and who they support. And right now the problem is a lot of them have no security in the countryside because we've been focused on something else. We haven't been working together with the Afghan army. So we have to start changing that. And the first step is to provide security. So then you start development, you start improving governance, and then you leave behind some structure that can actually function and be run by the Afghans.
One of the things you say needs to happen is that, or that you say happens, is that people follow that chain of command without seeing the nuances and really fully understanding the politics within the country. And you said that happened in Vietnam. Is that happening in Afghanistan?
I think not. I worry a little bit about large circles of advisors debating issues in Washington without having somebody from the field say, well, this option you're proposing is not feasible because, you know, based on local experience. But I know that they've had both General McChrystal and Ambassador Eikenberry in these discussions, you know, on TV, basically. So they are playing a role. But I worry a little bit, to tell you the truth, based on my Vietnam experience. A lot of proposals get put forth that don't make any practical common sense. You
were in Kabul for the elections that were held back in August, that there is now the allegations of fraud. There's going to be this runoff. Does the president, as we were reporting earlier, he says his decision on what to do there might come before the election. Senator Kerry's recommending that he wait until after the election to decide on troop numbers. What would your advice be?
Well, that's a tough one. The election is going to be pretty soon. I mean, it's, I think, the 14th of November?
7th. November 7th. So it's coming up soon.
We're not talking about much time difference. I think the worry is that this may detract from a focus on the elections. But what happened in the early election, this is important, we really turned over the supervision of that election to the UN, and they didn't do a good job. And it was only until Peter Galbraith came over there and blew the whistle that, you know, the fraud was exposed, and now we have to have a rerun. That should never have happened.
So you're hoping that the U.S. is going to have a tighter rein on the election, on the runoff. That's
right. And then a tighter rein on how the government, presuming it's probably going to be Karzai, but whoever it is, how they govern. We have not stress governance enough over there, and a lot of corruption has to be rooted out, and governments have to start being responsive to its people.
All right. Well, I wish I had another half hour to talk to you, because this is all fascinating to me. Rufus Phillips, thank you so much for coming in tonight. Really appreciate your being here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome.